In a narrow Supreme Court decision, her vote was decisive in the end. Judge Amy Coney Barrett, appointed by US President Trump. The decision could become a picture book example for future conservative judgments. After all, President Trump... I'm already on Trump, but I'm going to leave that in. President Trump can look forward to one message these days. In a close 5-4 decision by the Supreme Court on the number of visitors to church services, the conservative judge Amy Coney Barrett, appointed by him, played a decisive role. Trump's legacy is thus noticeable even before his departure, because the judgment could become a picture book example for future decisions and the legal jolt to the right. It's not the first time since the pandemic began that litigation over attendance at services has landed in the United States Supreme Court. No wonder, in a country where the church still plays a major role in the everyday lives of many people and, in some cases, exerts a decisive influence on politics. In May and July, the court had ruled on worship restrictions in California and Nevada. At that time, the governors were allowed to restrict religious meetings. But with the death of the left liberal judge icon Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the composition of the Supreme Court changed. Shortly before the presidential election, the conservative judge Amy Coney Barrett took her place and thus shifted the balance significantly to the right. The conservatives now have a majority of 6 of the 9 judges. Barrett had said all the right things when she was sworn in as Chief Justice on October 27th. She promised to be independent and not to be influenced by her own conservative views or by President Trump, who had appointed her. The specific effects of her appointment, however, can be outlined in the case of the state of New York. In the spring, New York had become the epicenter of the pandemic in the United States. Although the infection rate had stabilized halfway over the summer, the corona numbers have been rising steeply since October. The Democratic governor Andrew Cuomo has therefore imposed strict rules for religious institutions. In so-called red zones with very high numbers of infections, only 10 people are allowed to attend church services. In orange zones with fewer corona numbers, 25 people, independently the size of the church. These restrictions have now been overturned in a tight 5-4 decision by the Supreme Court. Barrett's vote was decisive for the conservative majority, as the conservative presiding judge John Roberts had spoken out in favor of maintaining the measures and thus agreed with the opinion of the liberal judges. The conservatives, or Republicans if you want to call them, or if you prefer to call them that, justified their decision on the grounds that the restrictions would violate the protection of freedom of worship as enshrined in the American Constitution. According to the famous Christmas carol verse, "You children, come, oh, come all ye faithful," the court order was based on 2 urgent motions by this. One was submitted by the Roman Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn, the other by the Jewish Orthodox community Agudat Israel of America. While New York Mayor Bill de Blasio closed the schools and daycare centers with a heavy heart on November 18th, after the decision of the Supreme Court, people can continue to gather in the houses of God, despite the enormous risk of infection. One seemed to like the Supreme Court ruling. Trump tweeted the announcement with the title, "Happy Thanksgiving!" Even after his electoral defeat, he can now be sure of one thing. Barrett's appointment as Chief Judge is finally bearing fruit, because the more divided the country, the greater the decision-making power of the courts. Regardless of whether it is about the protection of minorities, the climate, or employee rights, with their current majority of 6-3, the Republicans will continue to be right in the future. The Divine Service ruling in New York should therefore be a picture book example of upcoming Republican decisions by the Supreme Court. And if you now want to know more about global politics and news, YouTube has chosen another of my videos right here for you in the end screen next to the subscribe button for my channel. And right up there are more of my channels, visit me there too. I'll see you in my next video, click and enjoy. Viel Spaß!